This is the second tutorial, level 1, on autumn leaves. In the first tutorial, I explained the chord sequence and how it's in basically two keys, ending up in a minor key and beginning in a major key. The two keys are related, so one is a major and the final the other key is a relative minor, so relative major, relative minor. I talked about using the major scale and the minor scale with a raised seventh, and also the possibility of inserting a dominant seventh to lead us to chord 2 when we were going back to the tune. I talked about some of the chords that were in the piece. And in the next part of this tutorial, what I want to talk about is about the harmony and the guide tones. You can play through the whole piece doing the chord tones. So for example, the first 4 bars you could play as, obviously I can play chords, but if you're a saxophone or something, you might want to play the chord tones. Great, you'll get to know it really, really well, and that will help you improvise. If you know the guide tones, those 2 notes will guide you through the harmony. So the guide tones are the thirds and the sevenths. That doesn't mean you can't play any other notes, but if you think about those strong notes and you're aware of them, you can focus your melodies around those notes. So if your first chord is C minor 7, as it is in my key, the guide tones would be E flat and B flat. If you're a B flat instrument, your first chord would be D minor 7, so your guide tones would be F and C. And if you are an alto saxophone in the key, an E flat transposing instrument, your first chord will be A minor 7, so you will be playing a C and a G guide tones. So once you've got an idea of those guide tones, the movement to the next bar is minimal. Now I'm going to play them first of all as chords and then separate notes. Okay, so here's a 2-5-1 chord 4. With the guide tones. If I break it up, I'll play the bottom note first and then the top note, so you'll hear. And I was putting the roots obviously before, otherwise they just sound a bit dead. So you need to also be aware that it's not going to sound the same as if you were playing with a group, because those bass notes define the harmony. Note that although this piece has the chords 2-5-1, there is a chord 4 at the end, and that's where this is E flat major in my key. So, and you hear this as a cycle of fifths. If I play the guide tones inverted, you get the 7th at the bottom and the 3rd at the top. So essentially it's the same notes, I'm just playing them the other way around. Okay, so it would sound like this. And if I play them separately with the bass note to start with, or on their own. I apologise for my out of tune notes. I'm still in the middle of lockdown and cannot get the piano tuned, but that will be dealt with just as soon as we can allow people into our homes. So for the moment, that E flat is a little bit out of tune. These are really useful to guide yourself round the harmony. I've actually written out a little line here, and I'm going to play it. And in the line, what I've done is I've focused on those guide tones as a means to make my lines move well through the harmony. So it sounds like this. I'll play it slowly. Okay, so the first note, that starts on the guide tone. We're on chord 2, so that's on the minor third. And I approach the 7th chromatically. Putting in chromaticism always makes it sound quite hip. And I come to rest in the next bar on the 3rd of the chord. Now that's chord 5. And I leap up to the 7th, which is another guide tone. And I come to land on the 3rd of chord 1 in the major key. And I do a little descending line, dropping onto the 7th. And that ends on the 3rd of the next chord. Now that's the 3rd of chord 4. But that's anticipated. So although it's still in the previous bar, it's an anticipation, and that would sound like, I'll just play that last bit. So I'll play that at speed. Having set lines over sequences is really, really useful. I wrote this, actually wrote it away from the piano, just because I find that quite an interesting exercise, because often when you play an instrument you tend to come back to the same ideas because you get a muscle memory for playing certain chords and stuff and lines over those chords. So I like to do some of my creative ideas away from my instrument. Doesn't always work out, but I double check it afterwards, so hopefully to get something that sounds quite interesting but also follows the harmony. This is where the student can write their own lines. So I really advise students to write their own lines, especially when it's a 2-5 sequence. We've got 2-5-1-4 here. You could think about writing your own sequence and then obviously varying it and changing it. But once you've kind of got an idea of what works, you find that you naturally do that anyway. Okay, so let's just try that once more, and I'll play it a few times and try and vary it. So I'm just focusing on the first 4 bars. And you know, some of that works, some of it my left hand wasn't keeping up with my right hand in terms of ideas. At this point I'm really thinking, I'm not performing, I know I'm technically performing in front of the camera, but I'm thinking this is how I would practice. I would think of various ideas and I'd play it over and over again. And you can do the same thing with the minor key, and you can make up your own line that fits the minor key. Using the guide tones of that. The guide tone of the chord 2, 5. So I'll just improvise a line that perhaps uses those guide tones. So I just improvised. I mean, I was hitting other things, that's absolutely true, but I was thinking of guide tones. If you're a vocalist, it's a really, really good exercise to sing through the guide tones. It really, really helps you get through the piece. I'm just going to finish by playing the guide tones all the way through. The first time I'll have the 3rd at the bottom and the 7th at the top, and then in the repeat I will play an inversion, and then I'll sort of split it up in the middle 8 and the last 8. And I'm going to put a little walking bass just to make it a bit more interesting. Okay. I'll probably play it at a fast tempo as well, just to get through the chords. Okay, so I don't spend the whole tutorial just playing the piano. And as you can see, if you can't play the piano to a very high standard, playing the guide tones and the roots in the left hand is a great way to learn the harmony if you're able to have access to a keyboard. And that completes the second tutorial, Level 1 Autumn Leaves.